Hello everyone and welcome back to your next IELTS lesson. Today I'll be writing you a model answer for an IELTS Task 1 writing question all about a bar chart. Today there will be no lesson note as there's a lot of information being covered as well as a lot of ideas that we'll be reviewing from previous lessons. Please note down any language that you find interesting from this lesson. First up, let's review the structure for answering a Task 1 question. The key reasons we use this 4-step structure is so that you can score highly in task achievement, which makes up 25% of the band descriptors. Your first paragraph is the introduction, which really is made of no more than 2 sentences and introduces your report to the examiner. Next is your overview, which you must include to score a band 6 or higher. Here you report the main trends or the big picture of the visual information shown. Finally is our 2 detailed paragraphs, where you'll go into a lot more detail to report the features of the visual information shown. I'll be using this structure today to write my model answer. Let's take a look at the question I'll be answering now. Here is a typical IELTS writing bar chart. If we look at the title, it reads, Number of UK tourists visiting Thailand and Greece in millions. On the key we can see the 2 countries are Thailand and Greece. On the y-axis we have the amount given in millions, and on the x-axis we can see the 4 years from 2010 to 2013. The chart shows numbers of UK tourists visiting 2 countries from 2010 to 2013. Summarise the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. We've seen our bar chart and we have our question. Now the first thing that I and you should do is to make a short plan. The very same plan I showed you a few lessons ago. Here is our plan structure, which is Group 1, Group 2 and Overview. It's really important that you do this plan as it will help you to understand the chart or graph and to make sure you answer the question properly and score highly on task achievement. Let's take a look at my plan. As you should remember, the groups tell me what I need to write in each detailed paragraph. So as there's only 2 countries, I've decided that Group 1 or detailed paragraph 1 will all be about Thailand, whereas my second detailed paragraph will all be about Greece. For my overview section, I've identified that Thailand suffers a drop in the first year, then steadily increases throughout, whereas Greece fluctuates largely. Now that I've looked at the bar chart in more detail and made a plan, it's time to move on to our first paragraph, the introduction. The key thing to remember here is that for the introduction, we simply need to paraphrase and reword this part of the question. That means I will have to use my understanding of synonyms to create my introduction. And here is what I wrote. The bar chart presents the amount of UK travellers visiting either Thailand or Greece over a 4-year period. Now, it's important to say that my introduction sentence really has very little difference between the question's first sentence. I've just used different vocabulary to paraphrase. Let's take a deeper look at how I did this and what vocabulary I changed. Here I've identified 3 main changes that I made in my introduction. The first thing I changed was chart shows into bar chart present. I then changed numbers to amount and UK tourists to UK travellers. My last big change was in the final part of the sentence. I gave the name of the two countries and said it was over a 4-year period instead of 2010 to 2013. I hope you can see that synonyms are super useful in creating your introduction. Let's move on to our overview. It's important to remember that the overview paragraph should not contain any percentages, numbers, or figures. Here, we will only quickly report the main trends that we can see in the visual information. Generally speaking, your overview doesn't need to be any longer than between 2 to 4 sentences. Let's take a look at what I wrote for my overview. Overall, both countries saw drops and increases in tourism over time. Although Thailand saw an initial downturn, visiting travellers rose year on year thereafter. Greece saw big fluctuations in the numbers of people arriving in their country throughout the period. I began my overview with the word overall, and I recommend this as a great piece of vocabulary to start your overview. In my first sentence, I made a quick comparison between both countries and said they both saw drops and increases. My second sentence gave a quick summary of the major trends for Thailand, and my third sentence summarised what happened to Greece over the 4-year period. And that's it. That's all I wrote for my overview. Now, here are some key points that you must remember when writing your own overview. It should not contain any dates or figures. And the overview gives the overall trends, or as I like to call it, the big picture. Don't go into too much detail in this section of your report. That's all for the overview, but before we move on, let's review our report structure. So here we are, and we've completed the introduction, and we've just worked through the overview section of our report. So now it's time to move on to our 2 detail paragraphs. The bar chart we're reporting on has 2 countries. And as you may remember from our plan, detail paragraph 1 will all be about Thailand, whereas detail paragraph 2 will describe the trends for Greece. Here is my first detail paragraph. Now, it's very important in both detail paragraphs to really describe in detail all the facts and figures. As there's only 2 countries in the bar chart, I've described each year with the major trends and differences. In my first sentence, I gave the total of UK visitors to Thailand, but also made a comparison with Greece, saying that Thailand's total was higher. Where possible, do try and compare the data that you can see. I then went on to say that in 2011, the number dropped by 500,000. Please do remember to give the correct figures, as accuracy will help your mark. Finally, I reported the total number of visits to Thailand from UK tourists increased by 500,000 each year. And I also went on to add the detail that the final figure in 2013 was Thailand's highest amount. Let's see the second detail paragraph for Greece. I began my second detail paragraph with a general statement saying that Greece's numbers fluctuated largely throughout the 4 years. I then started describing 2010 and gave the figure of 2.5 million. Next, I use rocketed to describe the big increase in 2011. Now you can see I said it was slightly under 4.5 million, whereas if I said the figure was 4.5 million, I would lose marks as that is not correct. Importantly, I then described the next decrease with the phrase more than halved. If you can do this by saying halved, quartered, or use percentages such as 50%, 30%, and you can use them accurately, it shows the examiner that you have a lot of confidence and fluency in English. And quite simply, to finish my report, I gave the final figure for UK tourists in Greece and made a quick comparison between Greece and Thailand. So that's all for our model answer reporting on a bar chart. We've seen our introduction, overview, and both detailed paragraphs. I highly recommend reading through the full report, which is in an extra resource after this lesson. Next up, we'll look at another model answer, but this time for maps and processors.